morning. It's time for Bring It In, Troops Little Zoom from Quarantine show. I'm thinking Bilal often joins us from England, and he didn't have a time change. So maybe this is exciting for Bilal. This is a different time. Okay, so this is the show where there have probably been 24 NBA shows, games since we last had a show that I didn't see. And we're going to open with making fun of Paul Pierce for not seeing a show that he's talking about. Perfect.
I want to start with the 76ers taking on the Spurs because it was certainly a rout, and Ben Simmons was back out of health and safety protocols.
Yeah, when I look at the score, the end score of this game, what this tells me is that Joel Embiid is definitely playing at an MVP level because, you know, when he's the one player you're missing and you lose by this many points, I mean, they won. They win. They win. They won by 40. Well, he might not be on that MVP list.
I didn't hear it enough. What did he say exactly?
Oh, it was great. It was great. So, of course, the Sixers won by 35 last night, and Paul Pierce was on Sports Center or Get Up, whatever it was, on ESPN today. And he's like, this game proves why Joel Embiid is the MVP. They just got waxed by 35 points last night. Proof that he is MVP. And then you hear in his ear, Paul, they won by 35. And then he's like, oh, that's actually a reason why he's not the MVP. It completely reverses his take. So Paul Pierce is in the car wash at ESPN. He has to do like 100, hits for NBA analysis. And this happens. You're asked to do a take on a game that you like. Maybe people don't want to hear. Tobias Harris played great. So you always attach the mundane highlight with like a larger take. And in this one, Paul Pierce obviously didn't watch the game, didn't pay attention whatsoever. Maybe didn't even know that he was going to talk about the Sixers game, and just basically says, this is why Embiid is the MVP. And just, he blew it. So I feel bad for Paul Pierce. He's going to get dunked on this morning, but also, man, that is an ugly look.
There's you're supposed to have a strong take, right? You're not supposed to say the Sixers have pretty good odds of making the eternal. You got to be like, Embiid's MVP. You got to go really hard, which combines very badly with there's 1,230 games a year, and nobody except Geraldo Vulgaris can watch them all, right? You have to have a strong take, and you didn't watch the game. That sucks. It totally sucks. I don't know about you guys, but now I'm 45. Am I 45 or 46? Something like that. 46. Before I go on some radio show, I try to be like, hey, I would prefer to talk about things that I have written about, because I hate the freaking hey, are the Grizzlies going to turn on the second half? Because now you're like, you're asking me to lie. You know what I mean? You are asking me to lie.
Yeah, I think when Paul Pierce is asked to do a take on this game, there's a thing that goes on in his head is I didn't watch, so what can I say that will make it seem like I can pass this test without actually doing my homework, right? And it just turns into an MVP conversation. I think just talking heads, and I've been in that seat before, so I understand we are all conditioned to, in that 15 seconds, come up with something that the audience can go home or leave that TV and be like, hey, I learned something today. I can go text my buddies about the Sixers now because Paul Pierce told me what's important from that game or what's important in Sixers land. And it's hard because there's so many storylines in the NBA. There's so many games. If you're just tuning into the NBA for Monday morning and you turned off your sports brain over the weekend, so much happened. And for Paul Pierce to clue you in 15 seconds is a difficult task, but also one that you want to be, tasking that person to someone who's actually paying attention to what's happening in the league.
That would be good. Tom, it happens that you just wrote a very interesting article about Joel Embiid. Can you clue us in a little bit about that? And then we can update you on the fact that he's not playing now, which is such a bummer.
Jinx! Oh, man. I felt really bad about this because I wrote a glowing piece about Joel Embiid and how amazing he is, while also being a throwback 90s back to the basket, face up, post up machine in an NBA that is going in the complete opposite direction, it seems. Everyone's taking more threes, and Utah Jazz are kicking everyone's ass by launching from deep and also playing good defense, but maybe not last night. Anyway, Daryl Morey takes over this team after smashing every record in Houston And the interesting thing is the Sixers are taking fewer 3-pointers. Joel Embiid is the leading MVP candidate. And it just goes to show that analytics does not equal take more threes. There is this idea that these nerds are taking over the game and are basically poisoning the well by saying, hey, all you good big men, you need to live at the 3-point line and bomb away from 3. Enough of this whole back to the basket, Hakeem Olajuwon, Patrick Ewing, that style of basketball. That's for your grandpa. Now we are putting Karl Anthony Towns, Nikola Jokic, and Joel Embiid 30 feet away from the basket. That's not true. And I think it's really interesting to note, Daryl Morey, I talked to him. He was like, I don't care how we win. It's just we need to win. And this is what makes us best, is having Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons attacking the rim and being these amazing paint guys.
Yeah. How do you think? I mean, so one game into life without him, they're still okay. What the hell?
Yeah. And I think this is actually kind of good, is the idea that Ben Simmons, if you surround him with shooters, guys who can space, they can still kick your ass. They have two stars on this team, Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. They don't work perfectly together, don't complement each other perfectly. And there are a lot of ink spilled to talk about why that is a sign that they should blow things up or trade one of them. Mm-hmm. But like, you get to see Ben Simmons as Giannis, which is really fun. And I'm sure Ben Simmons likes that. I like writing. I like sharing the stage with you, Henry, and working with you, Henry.
Wait, but there are times
there are times where I'm like, Judy, can you just kick off Henry? Because I don't want to hear him talk about this. I just want to have the whole show to myself. Mm-hmm. And it's nice to see that.
Just kick off David. David's having technical difficulties. He's been texting furiously. He's resetting his modem. So your point is like really rich. That like David's out. Like that's just how it is.
In this analogy, is he Embiid, is what we're saying?
I think he is. Yeah, he's a little hurt right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Ben Simmons is really fast and really strong and really big. So I like that. So like, I think the Sixers are going to be okay. I think it's fun for Ben Simmons to play as the guy, quote unquote. And now that they have better shooters around him, I think it will amplify his talents even better. But my larger point, Henry, is it's hard because the storylines on Friday are, oh my God, Joel Embiid's going to be out for the season. He tore his ACL maybe. And then it's, oh, the news is actually he's going to miss 2 to 3 weeks with a bone bruise. And then we have to digest that. And then we have to watch them and see that they're amazing while also keeping track of the other billion storylines in the league. And I just think if it's homework for Paul Pierce to just have the basic stuff down, I can't imagine what it's like for the average NBA fan to keep up with all the different things that happen in a 2-day span. And it's my opinion that we would be much better. I think it's a much better product if there was programmed viewing or programmed days, appointment viewing in the NBA schedule, where I know I'm going to watch, if I'm in Charlotte, my Charlotte Hornets Tuesday, Friday, Sunday, every week. I know that I'm going to watch Tuesday, Friday, Sunday. And that regularly scheduled program, I think, will have an entirely new landscape for the fans to just digest and follow along and not feel like it's a lot to take in.
It does seem to work, right? I mean, high school football has Friday night, NFL, college has Saturday, Premiership soccer happens on the weekends, right? It has like, what is it, Wednesday, Saturday, Sunday? But it does seem like fans grasp sports that have days.
Yeah, and I just think the NBA is a hugely successful business, right? Entity. It's not to say that they need to reinvent the wheel here, but you look at the Pelicans game last night, they just blew the doors off of the Clippers, right? But they also got waxed 3 days earlier by the Minnesota Timberwolves and were completely reeling. Stan Van Gundy was saying how it's the most embarrassing defense he's ever been a part of, and practice was completely awful. And if you just turned off your TV paying attention to the Clippers 3 days ago, and now you're paying attention to them, you must be like completely whiplashed.
Yeah.
Like, I thought this team was terrible, and now they're amazing. And maybe that roller coaster is fun, but I also kind of feel like you might be losing some of the weight in every game if in 2 days it's old news.
Oh, I totally agree. Right. And Kevin Arnovitz's presentation at Sloan a couple of years ago, like, weighs heavily on me, where, peak TV has resulted in shorter seasons, right? Games of Thrones is what, 6-7 episodes. The idea is that scarcity ups the value of your media property, right? And we especially know this when there's all kinds of evidence that LeBron would make more highlights if he played fewer games because he would run higher and be a better LeBron, multiplied by every player and every star in the league. Yeah, it does kind of seem like there's so many arguments for fewer games. One more is then at least Paul Pierce can know what happened, right? That's just like, it's a favor to him.
Hey, coach, you're back.
Yeah, I'm just enjoying that conversation. It's the Pelicans are just one of many examples, right?
Yeah.
It's such a roller coaster right now. It does seem to be a race against teams who want to get the 1 seed.
Yeah.
All the better teams are struggling.
Yeah, the Jazz are trying to convince everyone they're real title contenders, and Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell light up the referees, and then a week later they're on like a 3-game losing streak, and they get blown out by the Warriors, who just got blown out by the Clippers. So you can see how this little flow chart is so confusing. Is Clippers are a disaster, but they also killed the Warriors, who were a disaster 3 days ago. And I think also it's just the hot takes on social media where every bad loss has to be symptomatic of a larger problem. Like Andrew Wiggins, Kelly Oubre, they're terrible. They're not good role players for Stephen Curry. And then they go out and they blow the doors off of another team. So it's just, to your point, David, there's a lot of roller coasters in the league right now. And Utah Jazz are not playing good basketball, as evidenced by last night.
Yeah, they're not defending the way they were before. And I told Henry on the phone, Wiggins was unbelievable last night. He was everything everyone always hoped he'd be on both ends. Like even their own announcer seemed a little bit like, hey, this has happened more than a few times now. He's having a great defensive season. Their team is, well, they were a top 5 defensive team before the weekend. I didn't check where they were today.
They're 30th now. See, this is how the NBA is just terrible.
No.
You know? Just kidding.
Yeah, they're. I mean, and Weissman, who only scores more or less around the rim, he makes a couple shots here and there. He played really well. So he missed those tests and was benched for 3 quarters. Had 14 points and 7 rebounds in 1 quarter. And I didn't see his final numbers last night, but I watched a lot of the game. He definitely scored double figures. He was very good at both ends. He was very good at both ends. So they've got something going to be for next year though. The Warriors do.
So it's a little tricky. Tom, I made a big impression on me years ago. You wrote a story about, I think 26 games is enough to pretty accurately predict the order of finish for the year. So, we have a bunch of extra games. But this year, I guess we're saying we need more than 26 games, right? We don't really have a firm sense of like, is Kawhi correct to be worried about the Clippers' performance thus far? Or do we say they've had a lot of people out and it's been a crazy year? And it's too soon to conclude anything. Like it matters because the trade deadline's coming up and they have to decide if they're going to do anything. Like how do you read the season so far on issues like this?
Well, I think there are 3 things that are happening here. One, new teams, like completely remodeled teams, like because of the player empowerment, teams are just changing like a turnstile. Who's playing for that team? Think about the Brooklyn Nets. Last year they had Kyrie Irving. Now they have Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. And then they got James Harden on the team too. So player empowerment means more transactions, more just volatility in the rosters. And so that 26 games might actually be longer. Secondly, COVID. A lot of really good players, a lot of players who are in and out of COVID protocols. And we just might not have a good grip on how good these teams are because they don't have their players. So third thing, players are just not playing as many minutes. So when you used to have a really good handle on a team because their best players were on the floor for 30, 40 minutes of the 48, we didn't have much volatility of the bench players are playing more minutes and there's new bench players and they're trying to figure things out. So I think those 3 reasons are pointing to today's NBA is just more unpredictable. And therefore it takes longer to figure out who's good and who's not. Whereas 20 years ago, not as much turnover on the teams, weren't dealing with a pandemic. And then you also had the best players were playing 40 out of the 48 minutes, and therefore a lot more consistency, I think, game to game.
David, if you want to talk on this topic, could you please number your points? That was very helpful to me.
I tend to use letters, A, B, and C.
Okay.
No, Tom nailed it there. It's just, listen, there's no practice. These guys are not practicing at all. There's a lot going on.
What happened? Oh,
Got the keys. Yep. Sorry.
There's a lot going on, and I think they're distracted. I think players, we see this. They're struggling, like what Tom's talking about, consistency. Of course, he's right regarding the players. The same players playing all the time, it's easier. But this year, even that isn't quite the same as it used to be because of all that's happening. And the games just keep coming. You can't catch your breath, right? You really can't catch your breath. And even the All-Star break didn't help. Like the Jazz and the Clippers came out of the All-Star break asleep. The Jazz almost lost to the Rockets, who were bad, right? So it's just going to be, the typical year on steroids. You just got to find a way to survive. You got to find a way to catch fire a little bit,
David, what do you make of Kawhi's comments? Saying he's very concerned about the Clippers' inconsistency.
I think it comes back from last year. Like they never really, when they finally were catching fire last year, I think they finished 9-1 before the pandemic break. That was their only stretch where like, all right, here we go. This is going to be a team that can compete with the Lakers, and they could never recapture it again. They reminded me of the Pistons teams that always knew they were going to make the Eastern Conference Finals, and we'll flip that switch when we need it. And I always thought it was a mistake to do that. They only won one title, and maybe they would have won more. I realized the one they won was surprising, but that's what they remind me of. I watched Coach Lue a lot yesterday. He's patient. I think he's going to go nuts behind the scenes. I thought during the game he handled himself pretty well, but I would do what Stan Van Gundy did. Stan really laid it out after their terrible loss to Cleveland, I think it was. No, Minnesota. They were like the third team ever to be up 15 or more in a game and lose by 30 or more. Like that just doesn't happen. You better chance to get by lightning, literally, than that happening. And he ripped it bare and blamed himself also, didn't just blame his players. But he blamed them too, which I thought was right. Like you can't just take it on yourself. And they played inspired last night. And they have Zion Williamson.
I want to piggyback on that real quick, Henry. Yeah. Just the idea of we always hear the cliche that defense travels, is that if you want a consistent team, that you better have a good defense because good defensive teams play well on the road. Defense travels more so than offense.
Right.
The Clippers are 15th in the NBA in defensive rating, adjusted defensive rating.
Yep.
Last year, they were 4th. And I wonder if some of that volatility is because they just aren't locked in defensively.
They're not, there's no way they're playing 100% effort with reason, right? But like they have all these Patrick Beverleys and Kawhi Leonards and Paul Georges who are supposed to be among the very, very best, right? And like they're just not. They're just not.
Who? If we did a ranking on 2 weeks, who would be number one right now? I know I'd pick. Who do you think, Tom?
If we did a ranking in
the last 2 weeks, like who has been playing the best basketball? You eliminate the break part of it. In these 2 weeks worth of games, who's the best team in the NBA during that period?
Oh man, probably Philly or Phoenix.
Phoenix didn't lose. Phoenix lost on Saturday, right? Like that's the little fly in the ointment here. They would be my pick otherwise.
So many flies. So many.
Obviously the Timberwolves, right? No, I'm just kidding.
I think it's the Heat.
Oh yeah.
What do they won, like 9 out of 10 now, or what's yeah.
Mike Ryan, who's the producer for Lebitard Show, he tweeted out retweeting StatMuse's like stat line of Jimmy Butler, and Mike Ryan goes, "Has a non-All-Star ever won MVP?"
Oh, this is a good question.
And it's like, man, I'm pretty sure the answer is 0 non-All-Stars to win MVP, but this might be the year that Jimmy Butler does it because it's a wonky year, right? You need a crazy year for something so outlierish to happen. And secondly, Jimmy Butler has been that good. So I think they've won 10 out of the last 11 games with Jimmy Butler in uniform. And also a lot of those games, Bam was not playing. So it's really impressive what Jimmy Butler's doing.
If he does win the MVP without being an All-Star, John Hollinger says, "I told you so." He wrote like he laid it out there very clearly that it was absurd that dude was not an All-Star. And I found it totally convincing.
He was an All-Star, you mean?
it was no Jimmy Butler. Like Hollinger wrote before the teams were picked that Jimmy Butler absolutely should be an all-star.
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
then he wasn't. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I probably said that wrong. All right, we should talk about rookies. Anthony Edwards. I didn't enjoy this at all as a Blazer fan, but Anthony Edwards scored 34 points. And then you point out, Tom, that he's actually like pretty good. Despite earlier reviews. How's he doing?
He's doing great over his last 5 games. He's averaging over 25, or he's averaging 25 points a game. He looks every bit as talented as a number one pick should be. I mean, we get so used to these 19-year-olds doing this that we have to recalibrate our brains and say, he's 19. This guy's super young and he shouldn't be doing these things at this age, just like LaMelo Ball is doing. And just like we saw Luka Doncic do a couple years ago. It's insane to watch someone this talented be able to produce at this level efficiently. Like that's the big thing, is he's not taking 46 shots to get to 25 points. And last night I thought it was great to watch his post-game availability. Someone asked him, how he felt about his performance. And he's like, well, I didn't shoot all that well. And the reporter was like, you shot like 6 of 14 from downtown. What do you mean he didn't shoot well? That translates to like 43%. He's like, yeah, I just feel like that's not a good percentage for me. I want to shoot better. And I'm listening to this being like, oh yeah, like this generation of players, I think understand. Well, maybe they did understand before, but it was all about points per game before. But the idea of the efficiency in his mind is like 6 of 14, even if it's 43%, like I want to be better than that. And maybe it's hubris that he thinks he can make all 14 3-pointers, but I love hearing that from a 19-year-old kid who gets 25 points in a game or 34 last night, that he needs to be better. And I just think that's really cool.
Caleb says he's covering himself for Nate Duncan's commentary.
What was that about?
Oh my gosh. Like we talked about this. Nate Duncan upset the whole entire world by responding to like pretty much the dunk of the year from Anthony Edwards a couple weeks ago by saying like, basically he's inefficient. Like
he was inefficient in that game. He said, this is the dunk of the year for sure, but also he's 1 for 13 or whatever it was. And actually, I mean, believe it or not, this probably got footnote number 4,000 in this story that Anthony Edwards was saying, yeah, I who cares about the dunk? I shot terribly. I played horribly. And it was Nate Duncan's exact point, but it happened a couple hours later. Yeah. And so therefore it wasn't really part of the story. But Coach, I wanted to know, is it okay to rate these guys or evaluate these guys 30 games into their careers and say, hey, I think LaMelo should have been number 1 or James Wiseman should have been number 1 or should we just like hit the pause button until like 5 years from now?
Do you remember the game 5 against the Mavericks in the NBA Finals where they double teamed Dwayne in the backcourt and they won in overtime, right? The pivotal game 5 in the 06 championships, I think. He scored like 36 points. I texted back then, Kevin Martin was, a pretty good scorer for the Kings. And I texted him after the game and said, I wrote, do you see how much energy it takes to score at this level every night out? Because he's been doing this all year, and now we just hit in the finals. Because you wouldn't be able to do it in the finals if you hadn't done it all season. And the next year, Kevin averaged 25. It is fucking hard to do this night in, night out against defenses oriented towards you. So the answer to your question is it's way too early to know how these guys are going to do when defenses start adjusting, not just in season, but season to season to what you do well and don't do well, right? Anthony Edwards is a freight train. He's LeBron James for his position.
He looks so big, right? He's just a strong dude.
Teenager.
He's my son's age. He goes downhill and you're in trouble when he starts but he takes terrible shots, guys. Terrible shots. Still, I don't know. LaMelo takes better shots. How about that? Than Anthony Edwards does. Anthony Edwards looks like LaMelo does in the NBL last year. He made him the other night. He's still not having a great season. He's been up and down during the season. I don't know yet. It requires more than what I'm seeing to know that he can do this on a mostly nightly basis for a period of time. But he certainly has a chance. Like both he and LaMelo have a real shot at being very, very special players. It's way too early to know if they will. And I put in the document, we've seen this so many times before. The best rookie is not frequently the best player from that draft, even though they were rookie of the year, deservedly so. We've got a ways to go here.
Here's
roll
my
through some of those.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Henry.
I'm sorry, Tom.
You're good.
To David's point, the rookie of the year is often not the best player from that draft. Do you want to like roll through some of the examples?
Yeah, it's on the yeah, I wrote it all down. So like, I mean, the most obvious one would be the Michael Carter Williams one, right? I don't think anyone thought he was going to be, first team All NBA. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that was not a particularly strong rookie class.
Right, but Giannis was in that class.
No, I'm saying
right?
like Giannis was a great player in that rookie
right.
class, but it wasn't necessarily a great rookie season by
for sure. But Oladipo, CJ McCollum, and Giannis were in that class.
Yeah, and
they were just not better than him as rookies, right? Damian Lillard is amazing, but Anthony Davis in that class, and so is Bradley Beal. I don't know. Cat deserved rookie of the year. Porzingis was great. Booker, look what he is now. Wiggins had Embiid and Julius Randle and Levine. Kyrie's really interesting. Kawhi was in that draft, and Jimmy B. Mm-hmm. Jimmy Butler was last pick of the first round. Right?
It's so funny. Like almost every case, this is like the low drafted person. It just takes us a long time for the cognoscenti to update their views, right? Of like somebody who was picked low. Like,
remind me, didn't Blake Griffin get injured his rookie year and didn't play?
Right.
Yeah, he hurt his knee.
Right. He was drafted with Tyreke Evans and Steph Curry. So Tyreke had a record-setting season. If you remember the 25-5, him and Big O, rookie season. Blake the next year was rookie of the year, but Steph Curry was in that draft.
Yeah.
Right. So
here's a fun one. What would you rather the rookie of the year, if you're a GM and you have the ability to trade for or have the rookie of the year every year, or the best player from 5 to 10 in the voting for rookie of the year? So like, would I rather have rookie of the year, or I'm going to be able to in 3 years get the best player that was 5 through 10 in the rookie of the year vote?
This is the first time anyone's ever asked this question.
You have to have the comfort of the GM not going to want to fire you. If you're the coach, if you're the GM, you have to have the owner say, I got you. That's why the long-term thing is important. You'd rather have the better player over time, right?
But Jeff Petrie was very happy to have Tyreke Evans because he was on the hot seat, right? They
said this before the draft when people in that room were arguing for someone like Curry. I can't say who it was, but someone spoke and said, you're the only one that has a long-term contract here. The rest of us run on last year. Like, that shit happens. They took a man. Tyreke Evans was a man a real man, physically, big, strong fucker, right? But come on, Steph Curry, I love that guy coming out.
So here's my question though, is if in 5 years we look back and LaMelo Ball is the best player in this draft, okay, he's looking like it right now, just production and talent, all this stuff. In 30 games, LaMelo Ball seems to be the best player from this draft. But if the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Golden State Warriors passed on him because of positional concerns, whereas the Minnesota Timberwolves are like, we have D'Angelo Russell. If we want to draft a guy who's really talented, we want to get the same guy or same position. Same deal with the Golden State Warriors. Like, we already have Steph Curry. Do we really need to share the ball with, LaMelo Ball? That I think is a mistake, is if you're drafting based on positional availability. In the case of D'Angelo Russell, it's like a felony crime compared to like a misdemeanor being like, Steph Curry. Like, if you're drafting a player, and I'm not saying this is true, but I'm saying if you're drafting a player based on you have D'Angelo Russell, so let's not double down on that position. I think that's a bad decision. So,
I do too, but I don't think they did that. But I agree with you. You should not do that based on position. And by the way, we know now you can have two guards that are both more or less primary ball handlers. That's what you want anyway. If you're worried about defensive matchups, that's fine. But still, you don't draft based on position.
I think this is where the tiers are handy. Like, I think tiers are a boring thing to read about, but I think that, if there's one, if you have in your mind that there's like, the Knicks this year, maybe Obi Toppin was the best player available by far to them, then you just take him, even though you have Julius Randle, right? And you're probably not going to play both of them long term, right? But because he's in that better tier, right? So I was a Blazers fan when they didn't take Chris Paul, right, for this reason, and I'm like, no, he's in a tier above, right? So to me, I think like if you can get a better tier player, forget position. But if it's we like all these players about the same,
Right.
then I think then let's talk about position.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. But I am not even Luka Doncic. You think Luka is the one rookie of the year that is the transformational player of the generation, not just of that draft. I understand the argument, but I am not telling you that in 5 years we're not going to think JJJ is the best player from that draft. I still think he's got a shot. He's had a bad run of luck injury-wise, and Luka's amazing. But when you've got a player like that guy that can impact the game on both ends the way he can, the way this league is being played now with those very, very versatile big men, I feel the same way about this year's class. Watching James Wiseman, knowing the kind of talent he has ultimately, he could be, he is impacting defense now and doesn't know what he's doing. Doesn't know what he's doing. There's advantage to it, right? So Giannis to me and Kawhi are both the classic examples. So we got to give these players time. It's hard to keep getting better. It's just hard, right? To really keep getting better and jump. It's easier to be from average to good than it is from good to great and great to all-star elite level. We don't know. LaMelo Ball to me still has lots of faults. He's got amazing talent. That isn't a surprise. How does he do defensively? How does he do when teams adjust to? I mean, he's a brilliant passer for sure. That shouldn't go away. But there's things that he does with his passing that defenses can react to. He's shooting better than anyone thought. Edwards isn't. Anthony Edwards is, what is he, 32% from three? 33? Do you remember, Tom, what Edwards is? What if he gets to 38, 39? That's a game changer. What if he doesn't? We don't know.
Yeah, what if he's Giannis and he just sits at 28?
Right,
you know?
yeah, and he's not Giannis. Look, physically, just that length. We just have to see how it goes. People have shot really well for a year and then never followed it up. Or they can get much, much better. LaMelo gets to be 43% from three, then it almost doesn't matter what he does defensively, by the way. LaMelo gets to be that kind of shooter. He can be a bad defensive player all he wants because he'll be one of the best offensive players in the world, and they'll make up for his bad defense like Damian Lillard. You know, like a lot of guys, right? But we don't know. It's way too early. You like to think you'll get better over time just because in next year, there'll be more practice time. There'll be more days to recover. There's not a lot of that right now. It's this crazy year that way.
I also would just point out, like, a lot of the best scorers in the NBA start their careers extremely inefficient. It's just how it goes. Like, I think you know, if you're Derrick Rose or Kevin Durant when you're young, like you have to put your body through these paces of learning all this stuff. And, you know, some people start extremely inefficient and just never get it, right? And some people start extremely inefficient and master every little detail. So it's just like, I don't know. This to me, this Anthony Edwards efficiency, you know, plus minus based climb, it shows me like, oh, he's getting acclimated some, right? But to your point, David, like, where does
he's done this before though? He climbed early this season and then he went back down. Everyone does to some degree for sure. But I'm telling you, it's really kind of interesting. And this is the worst year for it ever since we've ever had the NBA. It takes a season for teams to really figure out how to better guard you the next year. Well, and that's with normal practice days or even film study days in previous years. There's none of that this year. Frequently, these teams are not even talking about their opponent until they get to the arena.
Well, when you're shooting 32% or whatever, you hope that dude gets the ball, right? You hope that guy shoots. But when he's shooting 48%, then you put whoever your stopper is on, right? Like, it's a different. Now we got problems, right? Now you got to fight through Robert Covington's long arms or whatever, right? But before that, you're like,
well, he
by some little guy.
He actually killed Covington, but I know what your point is. He was going after Covington.
He was.
Do you guys think that today's NBA, when you have the ball in Luka's hands so much and you have like basic sets that you run or you try to get out in transition and take early open shots, I think that actually helps teams in this season because so much of the NBA now is get the ball to LaMelo or Luka or Giannis or whoever it is, and then just improvise. Not saying that like there's no actual plays in today's NBA, but I think back to like if this season was happening in the 80s or the 90s where coaches had a lot more influence on the playbook and like you have to run our sets for the full length of the shot clock, I wonder if it would just be a total mess. Whereas this NBA, I feel like You hand the keys to a virtuoso with the ball, like a Luka Doncic or like a Steph Curry or all these guys who are just super creative and innovative with the ball. And you have really cool things happen offensively. And you don't have to just like dump it down in the post and just hope that something good comes out of it. I just think today's NBA, I think, is better acclimated to this helter skelter season than most. But I wanted to, Henry, I want to talk about this video that you posted this morning, if we can.
Oh, the French one? Yeah.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
And it got me thinking. So can you preface what it is first? What it is we're talking about here?
Yeah. So I got a call a couple months ago from a journalist in Paris who was writing about, like, you know, what happens with doping in the NBA and is something to be concerned about. And lovely guy. We talked for a while. It sounds like they are doing, you know, it's mostly a soccer operation, but they're getting pretty serious about the NBA in Paris, which is just cool. I love that the world loves the NBA. And I pointed out to him this old story. Here we go. Justin.
He is awesome.
House of Balance, great name.
So he, when Lance Armstrong was busted, there were a bunch of books about, you know, how they beat the tests. And I took that book to the NBA. We had a bunch of meetings and they yelled at me a whole bunch about just like, you know, I'm like, I thought they were going to tell me that their testing regimen would easily catch Lance Armstrong, but it was totally wrong. I was totally wrong. Their testing is not the greatest. And it hasn't changed much. And so this is basically what we were talking about.
Yeah. And I was thinking about it with Zion and Anthony Edwards and Giannis, LeBron. These guys are huge. You know, like the idea that basketball players wouldn't benefit from being bulky or strong. Like if you look at the biggest player or the best players in the NBA, some of them look like Jokic and some of them look like Doncic, right? Some look like Kevin Durant. There are a lot of guys who are just monsters, right? Anthony Edwards, Zion Williamson, Steven Adams. These guys are super muscly and big and ripped. And the idea that PEDs or the idea that steroids would not help these players. We can go really into the weeds about like the science and the biology and chemistry of these drugs. But I'm like, as we're talking, Coach, I'm sitting here being like, man, how many players in today's NBA are just like so much bigger than Charles Oakley, like Anthony Mason, like that, like looking at Zion, and I look at a clip of Larry Johnson, who's behind me right here. Like, man, some of these guys are bigger than we could ever imagine. Like Giannis is huge. LeBron, those clips that they were showing in that French video are huge. And also the guy's hair is amazing.
I have a question. Is that Larry Johnson and you or Larry Johnson and Muggsy?
Wait, I'm taller than 5'3". I'm at least 5'4". Come on.
I can't see it. So who is it? You?
It's Muggsy.
It's Muggsy?
Yeah.
That's not the scale then.
Oh, you think he's too tall? Muggsy's
Yeah.
Yeah. It might be. I don't know. Ryan Simpson, who does these prints, he does an amazing job, but maybe he needs to work on his proportions.
I'm just saying, Muggsy was really little, but all I can say, guys, everything you say is right. I've coached a lot of players. Never once have I heard them talk about it. Doesn't mean they're not doing it, and it's not my area of expertise. I know my players have gotten a lot stronger. My son worried that he was getting fat because he's gaining weight, but he's definitely not on a peg, that's for sure. He's working, he's eating a lot, and he's lifting intelligently. There's science, and I am not denigrating anything what Henry's ever written about and reported. He and I talk about this for 100 hours over the last decade plus. I'm only saying there's also the other science too. You saw what Giannis was doing. I never did that when I was in school. The pelvic thrust up he had 3 rings on a side? Is that what he had? I mean, that's 200 some.
Yeah, I do
right?
4, but it's fine. Giannis,
right.
He's working at it. He's trying.
Right. Yeah, obviously. These guys are it's science on the training side. Whereas I feel like what I do for player development isn't how most other people do the player development. I'm trying to help players win games, not look cool. There are some really amazing strength coaches out there that understand functional strength. The P3 guys are an example, right? Where they're just getting stronger, more athletic, but also you're trying to prevent injury at the same time. So any strength guy that doesn't talk about injury prevention the day one, I always tell my players, leave him or her. you've got to be focused on injury prevention too. So that combination means a lot of guys are going to look like they do. I mean, I was told from one of the coaches for LeBron in high school that Nike outfitted a weight room for them at their school when he was 15 years old. And it was like state of the art, Kentucky's weight room, right? So they had huge advantages. And so that combination is what I think is happening in a lot of places. But just to go back to the other point we were talking about, Tom, I don't think it's just the Currys and the great facilitators everywhere. The difference in the NBA now and then is they only had one guy back then. They had one major primary ball handler. The second unit guy was just the quarterback. Hey, I'll throw you the ball, not turn the ball over. Now we've got centers with guard skills, and we're loaded with forwards with guard skills, right? Mm-hmm. Almost everyone has the ability to make plays. It wasn't that way before. That allows this game to be more jazzy than ever and not so dependent on the structure of the system. It doesn't mean they shouldn't use more of the systems. What is that?
It's your book.
Oh, cool. Okay, yeah. You can do it more than ever because of all these guys that can make these passes and dribble a certain spot. Now, I think passing has gotten worse, not better. I think it was better then. Why? Because guys couldn't take the ball wherever they wanted to go with the dribble. They couldn't do it. They had to do it via the pass. To me, the best teams are teams that can do both. Really deliver the ball when they need to accurately, right? And then also be able to make plays off the dribble too at any spot on the floor in any position. That combination makes you a great offense.
I want to talk about doping for a second, which is what surprises me is that there isn't a culture of people bragging about being clean. In running and cycling, it is. Like, it's super weird to me that we have culture of silence. This is like thin blue line kind of stuff where there absolutely is doping, which we know because even though the testing is a joke, people still fail every season. So it's definitely happening. So that means you're going to some gym with some trainer, with some product, and it's really happening. And imagine being your son, David, and going up against someone who is doping, which is a giant performance benefit.
Yeah.
Right? And not just in bulk, and how much you can train, how often you train, how you recover, etc. And beating them while you're clean, this, right? It's really weird to go to the mic afterwards and not say what runners say, which is like, you don't know how hard it is to do what I just did, right? It is. It's really hard. And the fact that the NBA has never had a single player brag about being clean that I know of is worrisome as hell because it makes me think that.
But don't you think, I think your point is brilliant, but don't you think it's because they don't feel like they're being targeted that way? And maybe our media needs to step up with that questioning, like in the sports you've mentioned, that's always a major theme. It's not in basketball. And you're arguing, and I agree with you, that it should be. And I think they might be more defensive about it. It's not in their minds, I don't think.
I mean, so David Stern lied to Congress and said that being bulky wouldn't help in basketball. Like that, in fact, on its face is not true, but it's also a big smokescreen because you don't need to get bulky. Like even anabolic steroids would be the one that makes you bulky. Lance Armstrong used anabolic steroids and weighed like 140 pounds.
Right, exactly.
Like it depends how you train, right? And which steroids you use on which cycle, etc. But HGH and testosterone would really help you with recovery, right? They're the best recovery substances in the history of planet Earth, and they're available among the most commonly prescribed drugs in America. Available at anti-aging clinics all over the country, right? So to me, like we've gone through these decades with this idea that like it couldn't possibly help, right? But that was always wrong. You stand outside the weight room, as you're pointing out, like these dudes come out freaking ripped, looking like anabolic portraits, right? Like bulging muscles, like in a way that didn't exist before anabolics on planet Earth, right? So to me, like that we've made it through this time without pressure from the public to say, hey, is this cheating, right? That's a miracle attributable to David Stern and a terrible testing program, right? But that doesn't mean that we actually made it through clean. And I can tell you just from like I can't tell you I know off the record, but I'll tell you this. There's a guy who knows a lot more about this than I do, who has had moments of his career where he was like in tears wanting to quit his job because there was just so much cheating. It's definitely happening.
Well, Henry, I want to ask you, do you think part of the reason why you're not hearing NBA players be like, hey, I'm averaging 30 and 10 and I'm doing it clean, so take that, is because it's a team sport versus runners, I think, are more individual in nature. And so there's almost a pride aspect of like, I do it clean, whereas a player on a team might be breaking code on the team, because if he says I'm clean, that might be pointing the finger at one of his teammates who is not. And I don't think you're going to get as much outspoken I'm clean, we're doing it clean, because it's a team sport.
Yeah, that's definitely a part. I also think there's like when everyone's super ignorant about PEDs, they blame the athletes, right? Like the idea is like we'd be busting an athlete, but that's not what it's about, right? If you read all these cycling books, these running books, it's like, no. These were like, this is people in tears 3 years into their career at risk of losing their jobs who have to make this awful decision and wish the league would protect them from that, right? Like they would love to compete against clean athletes and then they would kick their asses, but now they're not able to compete. So they're in this terrible situation, right? So it's like, to me, like every time I ever write about PEDs, I don't care about busting athletes. They're not that bad people. They're going to do whatever they have to do to keep their jobs, right? Like eventually, right? This is the way the pressure goes. A few people quit, I guess, over it, but it's rare. To me, it's more just like, no, can you make a safe environment? Are you doing your job? Like it's just like, the stock market, like, do you have to insider trade to be a good stock investor? It's like, well, maybe, maybe now, right? Like not if they policed it well, right? Like, so the question is like, is the NBA league where you have to cheat to reach the highest levels? Like, probably not. But like, but it would be nice if we have a big fall, right? If we have a crisis, if we go through what running and cycling went through, after that, people will talk about it and they'll brag about being clean, right? But and then fans will understand that. Now, if you brag about it, everyone's going to think you're an asshole, to your point, Tom, right? Because we haven't really embraced this. We haven't really explored this. We just think like, I don't know what, I guess we still believe David Stern's theory is really what's happening. Is that what's happening?
Well, I think people aren't really understanding that recovery is such a big part of the NBA.
Right.
It might be the most important thing about the NBA is the ability to recover and get in a plane and perform the next night and then do it all over again in a new city. Like it's so out of sight, out of mind. Fans don't see what Damian Lillard does on a nightly basis to prepare himself to play and be the leader of the team and travel all over the country, because his team is in the top corner of the United States, and that matters in an NBA schedule. Whereas if you're in Cleveland at the heart of the country, you're not traveling as much and it's just not as strenuous. But Damian Lillard, man, it's almost impossible to be as good as that guy is on a nightly basis without a super appreciation for recovery. And fans just they don't see it. They don't know it. And maybe they don't care about what a player does to prepare every day.
And I went to, a meaningful experience of my life was going to the Silicon Valley Sports Conference. And I happened to be sitting, that's the day I met Christy Oshmond, science writer. And like, everybody has technologies to help you recover. And it's like, here's this bed you lie on. Here are the ultraviolet pajamas, whatever. There's like all this stuff, right? And Christy's basically like, they have research on this one. It's totally bogus. Like, and she has the whole book on it, right? Like she has a whole book where she explores like every single one of these things. And basically nothing works. Like nothing is rigorous science behind recovery therapies except HGH and testosterone, which absolutely fucking work. And as we're like, if you really want a science-based solution here, I'm thinking this, like, I'm like, wow, there's a lot of money. There's a lot of investment. There's a lot of, big wigs investing in recovery. And I'm not even kidding you. I cast my eyes over here. There's only 100 people in the room. And there's Lance fucking Armstrong. Like he's literally in the room sitting there. I'm like, what are we doing? Like, this is a room full of cutting edge elite trainers. And I'm sure a lot of them are super honest, but I'm like, we're looking for little scientific charts of what helps people recover. And there's Lance Armstrong.
Well, it reminds me of like how NBA players will go get PRP injections in their joints and knees and stuff. And there isn't a whole lot of science to say that it works. And yet the teams will foot the bill and make sure that a certain player gets blood spinning and injection into their knees or their back or whatever it is. And they're willing to risk that, or their players want to get those therapies, even if there isn't a whole lot of science to back it up. What else are they doing?
Right.
So like that, like those PRP injections are very borderline of like what is legal or what isn't legal. And there isn't a whole lot of science to back it up. And yet this happens all the time.
There's a video, I'll find it. There's a photo you can Google of a hamster that's been genetically modified that was grown in a lab. And then they have, this is all disgusting. They have killed the hamster and they have skinned the hamster, and you can see it looks like the Hulk. It's like the strong, and it's a gene that we have. Like you could do that to a human. So are we sure that like the 11th man on the Timberwolves who's not getting minutes right now because he's a little too slow, right, or can't jump quite enough, wouldn't accept a genetic experiment on himself, right? Like, yeah, the hamster's going to play for the Timberwolves. That's what I'm saying, Caleb. Gerard, you should join us now. Let's close in style.
I want to further the point
Yeah.
when you talk about what NBA teams or what NBA players are willing to do. These are guys that are really getting fine-tuned in their diet. And I remember reading some of Steph Curry. I knew about this beforehand. One of his teammates had invested in a company that took like blood samples and stuff and matched up how your body reacts to certain foods. So that would affect what you're eating, especially before games. And Curry saw this player always on his app and said, "What are you doing?" And the player told him, and he's like, "I'm going to try that." And then it really changed. He felt like he played much, much better. And my point on this is, and I've dealt with players who call me just on how much salt is in this hamburger from the room service. I can't look it up. This is back before the internet on their phones. Like these guys will do anything. So to your point, Henry, when there is cheating going on, it's so incredibly unfair compared to the guys who don't want to cheat, but will do anything it takes to improve their performance. That unfairness is legitimate because these guys will do anything to win.
Hello, Gerard.
Hello, Henry.
How's it going?
It's going well. This is an interesting conversation. I athletes trade on their bodies. Like that's how they earn their living. Like, I mean, it's not, there's no two ways about it. So the idea that HGH and PEDs aren't something that would benefit you is ludicrous, right? Like it's scientifically proven. So I guess the question really is, to Henry, your point about the NBA making a safe environment, like, well, why not just be ahead of the curve on this, right? Like get all super smart science people involved and be like, we don't care. Our players can take HGH under the guides of like, prescribed by a medical professional with the right performance team and all that. If that helps, let's do it. Like, why are we acting like it's some taboo or fifth wall? Like, oh, but you got to do it clean. It's like clean. Like, what does that even mean? Like, what does that mean?
So there's a list of acceptable and a list of acceptable and unacceptable substances, right? So I think the thing is like there are arguments to be had to your point to add things to the list. Like you can use caffeine, you can use ice, you can use aspirin, whatever. Maybe you add HGH, maybe you add testosterone. Like I'm not the FDA, I don't know how safe this is, but like if it's not going to give everybody cancer when they're older, then I could see adding them. The bummer is I don't think there's any way to just do shitty testing. Like, I think that not knowing what's in everybody's body puts the pressure to explore the next thing. And now we're doing weird science experiments on these very like finely tuned like bodies that people are betting the farm on, right? And it's like, don't make, like a lot of the cyclists went to really shoddy doctors in Madrid who substituted the wrong blood, oops, by mistake, and then almost died during Tour de France, right? It's like, don't send the finest athletes in the world to the shoddiest doctors in the world, right? Like I think the only protection against that is just, I hate it, but just super invasive around the clock testing, right? Like,
and your challenge there, of course, if you're the league and just whatever, is also the optics, right? Now you're doing this on finely tuned black bodies, right? Like, and if there is something happening there with HGH and PEDs, right, we are talking about black people doing it, right, by and large. And that, from an optics perspective, and however you want to look at how the country decides policy and laws and whatever, that's all bad. Like from a just optic viewing. Caleb, I like that. Let's only experiment and test the white dudes. That's a good idea.
Well, I think you want to protect the people who are the victims of it, right? And so in cycling, that's like, so Andy Hampson was the best American cyclist. Everybody started using various doping products in the mid 90s, and he just quit. He was the victim of it, right? So like I think the Players Association, when I had lots of talks to them about this, like they don't know that their members are the victims of this, right? So like the clean athletes are the victims. So what do you want to do for them, right? Like, well, one of the answers for Andy Hampson would be test me, right? Like, test me, and then we can see. Then I don't have to fight. Like, I feel like it honestly. I feel like about this all the time when I'm a runner and there's a truck. I'm on the side of the road. I'm like, if we hit each other, I just die. Like we're just the difference in size is too big, right? That's a little microcosm of going up against a doper, right? Is like they just crush you. Like, you want to be protected, which means all the clean athletes. This is why I would like to see t-shirts saying like, I'm playing clean. Fucking test me, right? Because then you got to test everybody, right? And then it gets interesting. Yeah, year 1, you're gonna bust some superstars. That's gonna happen. But year 5, David's son will never have to face any pressure from anyone to start.
One of his trainers, his best trainer I ever had here that I used for NBA players, his company brand was sauce free.
Yeah, see, that's good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I thought this. I still think he's a genius in the way he trained his players, and yeah, he made it very evident. Like, we're gonna do things as well just for a long term purpose. Really, his thing was, we don't know what the effects are long term. And I called my brother, who's the doctor, and he's like, I agree. Like, I don't know. We don't know what some of these things will do for down the road. These guys are young people, right? So yeah, it's a great point. I never really thought about it until you said it. Yeah, his thing was sauce free.
I like it.
Yeah, it's I think we got to start that conversation, which we're doing. We got to get people to start talking about it.
It is weird though, like nobody talks about it. Like nobody.
Oh.
Nobody. Ask yourself why that is. No,
we have this image. We have this image of Drago from Rocky IV getting the shot and the needle, in his arm. I don't even know what it looks like. I don't know if they're pills. I don't know if there's creams. Like, I don't know what they're doing, but I just know with my guys, they tell me, I think everything, but maybe they don't. I'm like a dad sometimes, and you always keep thinking you're dad. But yeah, they know how I'd react, so maybe they keep it from me for sure. But they
Tom,
don't.
Are you doping?
What's that?
Tom, are you doping?
Is coffee banned from this show? Because if so, I am guilty as Jose Canseco.
That's like to your point, Henry, about like the running thing, right? Like, obviously being a swim coach and like Evan being around it, like I've seen swimmers like before a big race, like, have a half cup of coffee, right? Just to get that, like, that is a benefit, right? That little jolt of caffeine is a benefit. So I just think it's all, it's all a slippery slope. I'll say that.
I don't think there's like I don't know. My personal interpretation of everyone's like mystified. I think it's like athletes get to use what fans use. I think because it hurts the sport. Fans will be suspicious. Like when Lance Armstrong is using HGH and testosterone, and then 10 years ago, and nobody really knows what that's like, then the fans turn off the sport when it seems all creepy. Like, but when he uses caffeine, which to your point totally works, it doesn't turn anybody off because the fans get it, right? So to me, like, when enough people use HGH and testosterone, it wouldn't be the worst thing to have the FDA say it's okay.
Doctors prescribe it to you all the time, so like, not bad. But again, it's because I think the idea is in your mind: are you running rampant with it, right? Versus is it a controlled, specified outlay of whatever given by someone who has the qualifications to do that to you, right? That's what the hang up is.
Is it in swimming? Did you run into it in swimming? Can you talk about it?
In doping? I can't really talk about it. It happens, like, obviously at like various levels. There's a whole, you talk about the East German team back in the 80s and like, and then now, like, for sure, like in this 2000 Sydney Games and 2004 in Athens, like HGH is a thing, right? Like, because swimming is another sport. The ability to train hard on no day off on Tuesday. I have to come back on Tuesday and train hard again, right? Yeah. Like, well, how do you do that? Well, I got some ideas.
Did Michael Phelps ever test positive?
No.
Gerard, are you bald because it helps you swim faster? Is that why you're bald?
I am bald because it looks great on me. For one. Number two,
and everybody.
Yeah, I feel you guys are just making fun of me. I used to have good weather here.
And then, like growing up, like for sure, like if you're, your big ratio, the full shave down, so it works.
I'm not gonna try it until I have.
This is the first time I've seen peach fuzz on Henry, right on his chin.
Yeah, he got a little sloppy. Yep. First time. That's exciting. I feel like
All right, Randy, I'm down in the chat over there. Full, like, whatever. It's a term, Randy. Don't get
also,
crazy.
This is also a good book if you want it. Henry recommended this
Oh,
one.
that's a classic. Daniel Cole's been on the show. Love that guy.
Yeah.
The Secret Race, Tyler Hamilton and Daniel Coyle, the Inside the Hidden World of the Tour de France. Like this book blew my mind. The things that they would do to their bodies are outrageous.
It's one of the best sports books ever.
Well, Judy's gonna do it to us if we don't get on.
We got to go. Yeah, she's gonna. Yeah. All right. Thank you, everybody. Wednesday we'll be back. Thank you, Gerard. Thank you, David. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Judy.
Be safe, everyone.